All right, scholars, our topic for today is alliteration. And alliteration is all about the sounds that words make and especially making things musical and poetic. So alliteration is the repetition of sounds at the beginning of words. And this is a tool that poets use, that writers use, that we can pay attention to for our benefit. If you've ever played a game where you have to come up with an adjective to put in front of your name so that you have the repetition of sounds, you might realize that one of the reasons that people play that game is that it helps you to learn people's names and to remember them, because things that repeat sounds, they kind of catch in our brains, and so they're easy to remember. One thing to note here is that it is the repetition of sounds and not necessarily letters. So you could have J's and G's that are making the same sounds. You could have S's and C's that are making the same sound, or K's and C's that are making the same sound, or whatever, PH's and F's. Alliteration is not about the looks, it is just about the sounds, and we'll take a look at an example to see that. First, one really common example of alliteration that you know of is tongue twisters. So she sells seashells by the seashore is an alliterative phrase, and we like them because they're hard for us to say sometimes, or they're catchy, and they really stick in our brains. They give things a really poetic and musical sound. The poet Edgar Allan Poe wrote a really famous poem called The Raven, and using alliteration as a poetic device in the poem is something that he does really, really well. Here's the first line of the poem. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary. And so we've got other things in the poem like rhyme and rhythm, but we've got this W sound that's repeating, and there are 3 W's, but we actually have the W sound 4 times because we have it with once. Even though once isn't spelled with a W, we still have the W sound. So once, while, weak, and weary. In a couple lines further down, it says, deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. So we've got a repetition of a different letter sound there. One thing to note here is that when you have consonants that are creating your alliterative sound, so consonants as in not vowels, another term that you can use for that is consonants, spelled with a C-E at the end here. When you're using vowels instead of consonants to create your alliteration, then you can call it assonance instead. So there's a little bonus tip for you to be more specific in your alliteration terms.